Hello and welcome back to the Work Well podcast. This is the final episode of season 2, and today on the show I'm delighted to welcome Lynsey Perdisatt. Lynsey is the Director of HR and Change at the HPRA, that's the Health Products Regulatory Authority. In her role as Director, Lynsey is responsible for the design and delivery of the Human Resources and Change strategy for the HPRA, which has a significant focus on employee well-being and engagement. So much so that the HPRA were the first public sector organisation to attain the KeepWell Mark. A board member of the Health Information and Quality Authority, HIQA, Lynsey is also chair of HIQA's Resource Oversight Committee and a non-executive director for the charity 1 in 4. Big challenges of late that Lynsey calls out are working on ways to support the HPRA staff working from home and also reflecting and planning for what the longer-term future of work will look like. Please enjoy my conversation with Lynsey Perdisatt. So Lynsey, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to be here.
So how are you?
I'm good. Pretty rotten weather at the weekend, but yeah, all good. I have a grey morning, Monday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're the Director of HR and Change at the HPRA. Could you maybe give us a bit of background and tell us maybe what a typical day might look like?
Yeah, so probably not that many people have heard of the HPRA. So that's the Health Products Regulatory Authority. So it's a bit of a mouthful, and that's why we shorten it. So we're the regulator for all health products. So that's everything from your medicines to medical devices to cosmetics. So it's super broad. And so we are based normally in Earlsfort Terrace in Dublin. And we have about 360 staff. So a kind of typical day for us in HR is we're basically executing a HR and change strategy for the last 3 years. We're into our last year. And that's all about kind of focusing on the employee experience and building the infrastructure over the last few years. So it's everything from kind of really comprehensive engagement and then up to kind of recognition, and all with the view to kind of retaining key talent, because we regulate an industry which is life sciences. So it's a very attractive kind of industry, and they're looking for a lot of staff, a lot of talent. And so it's really important that we can attract really high quality staff and that we can retain them as well when we're in that competitive environment. So we've been really focusing on that for the last number of years. So kind of when I say it's kind of busy recruiting, but also I think it's really more about the development piece and sort of making sure that when someone joins the HPRA, that their experience kind of from start to finish, however long that might be, is a really positive one. So that's kind of where we've been really focusing our time the last few years.
Excellent. And would I be right in saying then that the HPRA are responsible for the PPE that we're kind of all now experts in? Is that something that, I mean, I guess regulating that to kind of the import of those products?
There's some responsibility there, yeah. And there would be other organizations involved in that as well, like the Health and Safety Authority as well. So, for example, we would have been very heavily involved in supporting the work around ventilators, which was a huge issue at the start of the pandemic. So the organization was really busy before the pandemic and has been really busy since, just by nature of the kind of products and devices that we're involved in. And before COVID hit, I suppose one of the big areas we would have been working on is the impact of Brexit and really making sure to protect the supply of products to the Irish market, because Ireland and the UK would work very closely and have a lot of kind of products they would share, and common leaflets and labeling and things like that. So we would have been really focused on Brexit and the impact of Brexit that probably the last 3 years or so, 2 and a bit years. And then obviously COVID hit and that changed everything.
Sure, yeah. And course, still a lot going on with Brexit too.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that the 3-year strategy, the HR and change, where does wellbeing fit in there? Does that have a dedicated pillar, or is that included elsewhere?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I think at the time when we were designing the strategy, we have wellbeing in under kind of, say, the pillar of retention and engagement. And that just seemed to be a logical place for it to sit at the time. But as we're looking forward to doing our next people strategy, which we'll start working on next year, we've already decided that 100% kind of well-being will be a pillar in and of itself. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, it has really grown over the last, 3 years in the organization and has become really, really embedded in our culture. So I think we want it to be a pillar of its own, but it's also, I think people will expect it to be, because it's such a common part of our language and how we engage at the moment, that people will expect it to be central and core to everything we do. So I think that's a bit of learning for us at the time. Our ambitions maybe weren't as big as they have grown over the last number of years, and we've seen such huge benefits from it too. So I definitely think it'll be a pillar of itself next time round.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm hearing other organizations kind of making the same noises, that it's going to be, and I think that's really the way to do it as well, to have it included as part of your overall strategic plan, that it does get a pillar in its own right. So that's really positive to hear.
Yeah, I mean, even in our new strategic plan, so the organization is governed by a 5-year cycle of strategic plans. And next year is our new strategic plan, and we're just finalizing it at the moment. But one of the goals, our 5th goal is around having great people, great processes. And kind of one of the subheadings in there is all about having that employee experience that focuses on the well-being of our staff and ensuring that they are kind of, I suppose, at the center of all of the considerations. So, building and investing within, to maximize how we provide our service to the public on the way out, I think is really important. And that's really something that thankfully is really shared by the senior leadership in the organization.
Okay, yeah, and so it's on the agenda for the future, but it's been on the agenda for a while as well, because you were the first public sector body to receive the KeepWell Mark.
We were, yeah, very, very important accolade for us. Yeah, I mean, we were doing a lot, I would say, in wellbeing before we even came across the KeepWell Mark, and we really wanted to push ourselves and see, could we go for accreditation? See, could we stretch ourselves? And we knew what we were doing was appreciated. We knew that we were making really good use of our resources, but we really wanted to see the sustainability around that, in terms of running the same kind of programs, and was it still delivering the same value? Were we fresh in our thinking? Were we keeping up to date? And when we saw the KeepWell Mark, we really just liked the holistic approach in terms of all the way from sort of leadership as a standard, all the way back down to things like, physical fitness, eating well, all of the other different key pillars, mental health and mental well-being, which was an area we had done some work in, but by no means had kind of hit the standards at the level we would like to in the KeepWell Mark. And so when we prepared for that, we could see that we were achieving really well in some areas, but we could see that we really needed to do more in a lot of others. So I suppose when we engaged with IBEC and we went through that accreditation process, we learned so much about what we had done. And also it really helps you with planning for action for the future and where you want to go to from there. And it set the ball rolling for us in terms of things we wanted to do and really stretch ourselves around areas that, like, you'll know this really well, and you've spoken about it before, like things like evaluation, and really effectively looking at what you're putting into your program and how effective it is. It's really tricky, really tricky area. And you know, that is something that I'm not saying we've mastered it, but we've put efforts into it and we're really learning and we want to keep learning about it. So when you kind of go into a program like KeepWell, it sets you on this trajectory, which you can choose to go along as fast or as slow as you want or you're ready for. And, you know, for us, you know, we were blown away at how we compared, because there's no differentiation between public sector and private sector. So we were in there up against other organisations that would have had far more significant budgets available to them than we did. And even in the first year when we won an award for best in class for leadership. So again, I think that kind of reflects maybe the real buy-in that's in the organisation around well-being, that a lot of the things that we needed to meet, we had met already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like you're already doing a lot before you signed up, but this kind of gave you quite a bit of a structure and something to aim for in a couple of different areas. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we've tried to also kind of go out there and be part of communities. And again, I suppose someone like yourself, you know, you've been so instrumental in building communities of practice where people can come together and share. And, you know, we started attending the different events that you were holding, and then getting in and getting part of different, I suppose once you get into the community, you get to know people and then you get to learn and you get to see what others are doing. And I suppose what we wanted to do all the time was just freely share what we're doing and be really open about that. And I think people in the community are really, I'm sure you'd agree, are really good at doing that as well. So we've taken loads of things from what we've heard from attending different courses and events, and we've used that. And then we have shared what we've done with the view to kind of saying, well, look at us, you know, we're not a big multinational organization with, you know, tons of money, but we have managed to win awards and we are always learning. And, you know, why not, you know, share the best of what we're doing and take what you might like and use it yourself, or, you know, come and talk to us if you want to. And I've gone and spoken to other people at different events and come across providers and different people then that could come in and do talks in your organization. So I think what's really key and what we've learned is it's not just doing it on your own, you know, and it's just looking at what is out there, talking to people, and then it's about kind of matching that with what the people in your organization actually want. And I would say one of the most critical learnings for us over the years has been to not assume we know what everybody wants, you know, and really actually go out and ask. And I know it sounds really simple and obvious, but a lot of organizations don't do that. A lot of organizations say, you know, oh, well, we'll have yoga and we'll have this and we'll have that, and that's fine. And then people don't show up. And then they are perplexed and wondering, why is no one taking part in this? Or, you know, and we made those mistakes at the start. And then when we started asking people for their feedback, and then when we started doing yearly evaluations of our plans, we started creating health and wellbeing plans, getting it approved by our board and our management, our senior management team, disseminating it. And then we would have monthly plans, monthly themed events. And then people can actually, throughout the year, they can see what was in the plan, they can see what's happened. And then we evaluate along the way, but we also ask them at the end of the year, you know, what should we stop, start and continue doing? And people really appreciate that, particularly if you take it on board. Because as I said, I think we all can fall into the trap of there's a lot of work involved in organizing these things. You know, so the actual evaluation piece is quite a big piece of work. So, and keeping on top of it and being responsive and making it simple so people can give you the feedback really quickly and easily. It's not a cumbersome. That has been, I would say that is really, really key to getting more engagement in your well-being. And if you're getting engagement, it's because people are getting something out of it and because you're listening to what they really want as opposed to what you think they should really have.
You make some really great points there. Yeah, we've all been guilty of assuming what the next intervention or how the direction to take should be, but actually going out and asking our people what direction they would like to go in, or what kind of their needs and wants. It's so important, isn't it? And as you said, so often overlooked, but so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, we've kind of evolved in that over the years, from just doing surveys to kind of for evaluations from people who attend events, to then forming an actual committee of health and wellbeing members. And that's representative across our organisation. Now, we're very fortunate. We have, from an early start, we had designated one person in our team as being sort of lead for health and wellbeing, and that's a team member called Liz Giltrap. I think you know Liz, Brian. Liz is incredibly passionate about health and wellbeing, and she was an obvious choice and she engages really, really well with people. So Liz kind of chairs that committee, and all new people that start get an opportunity to hear from the committee. We talk about the programs we do, but ultimately that committee helps with supporting the development of the plan for the year. They also, though they really go out and they're our champions in the organisation. So they get their colleagues riled up and interested. They get their feedback, and they get that kind of under the radar feedback that you wouldn't necessarily get from a survey, you know, about how people are finding things. But they're really out there promoting. They're at team meetings or at department meetings. They're updating on wellbeing and what's happening in the organisation. So you're kind of getting your message through in lots of different ways. And it's not all, say, coming from HR or communications or whoever's in charge of wellbeing in your organisation. So that the whole point is trying to decentralize it, you know, take it out of the HR function and make it part of everybody's responsibility. Everybody's accountable for it and everybody can have ownership over it. So that has taken quite a bit of time, but it has been really, really beneficial. And say, for example, if we want to, like, we have, say, a virtual running club, one of our steering committee members runs that herself. So she sets up the kind of WhatsApp groups and she sends out notifications, and they, you know, that helps us in HR. So it's not always us that's pushing or organizing, but also I think it helps other people see and get that message through that it is a shared accountability for wellbeing, and it's not something that's just coming from HR. It's not someone telling us, oh, you should do this. It's your own colleagues that are doing it as well. You know, when we got more people involved, more of our own staff, like, for example, some of our staff we're really fortunate that we have a yoga instructor on staff. We have a fitness instructor on staff. So they lead our yoga classes and our fitness classes. And so people really appreciate having these things organized by their own colleagues. And so they attend to work out, but they also attend to support their colleagues as well. So, you know, that has developed little communities within the organization as well. And again, doesn't cost the earth. It's something that people like to do. So you can give that person back the time that they're giving, you know, and it's a little gesture. But and then obviously you can give them thank yous, or, you know, give them a little voucher or whatever it is during the year. It's so appreciated and recognize them, I suppose, amongst everybody in the organization too. And people really like that and they really buy into it.
Excellent. And you're touching on so many of the key, almost foundational steps in the 8-step framework that I talk about for developing a sustainable wellbeing program. Step 1 being the importance of committed leadership. Step 3 is those needs and wants of colleagues. And then step 2 is that team of wellness champions, or the wellness committee, as they're called in the HPRA. As you rightly say, like, wellbeing shouldn't be owned by one person or one team in a silo. Kind of needs to be a shared value across the organization. And it sounds like you have your committee, your champions are made up of the people are coming from different areas within the organization. They're volunteers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah, they are.
And is there any other kind of structure in place? Do they have, you know, a meeting frequency? Is there any kind of formal time allocated to what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, they would meet, I would say, they would have regular meetings. So they're at least meeting quarterly. But outside of that, then, you know, Liz would meet with the different steering committee members that are, say, running certain events or leading out on. But she would be in constant communication with them because, you know, they are, each month, we always have something going on from a wellbeing point of view. So they are, as I said, they're like a conduit for the communication. So she would always be in contact with them so that they are up to date completely on what's planned, what's going out, and that they can reinforce that message as well. And then they would do quite a bit of concentrated work at the end of the year as well. So we're coming up on that time of the year now where the evaluation for the year's events will go out. It's the survey. And then Liz will analyse all the feedback that's gotten. And then she will take that to the committee and they will pore over that to see, you know, what did people say they'd like to see more of, less of. Now, this is a really unusual year because obviously the year that's in it, all our programs that were designed and all our plans at the start of the year were formulated around being in a physical workspace. Mm-hmm. So everything from, you know, something that's really, really popular that we use is notice boards and dead space, like, you know, in bathrooms, behind doors, in lifts, for promoting things. And all that went when we all started working remotely. So it has been a challenge to get our message out there and communicate. So more than ever, the kind of steering committee are really important to do that. Without bombarding people completely with email, because I think everybody is overwhelmed with the amount of emails that are going out there. So this time of year now, that what they'll be doing is they'll be looking at the survey and they'll be meeting more frequently to see what shape is it putting on the plan for next year. And like, as I say, that plan goes to our board in January and it goes to our management committee and it's endorsed and feedback is given at that stage, and then it's communicated down through the organisation. So basically whatever that plan is, it's driven by the feedback that we get at the end of the year, the previous year.
Very good. And for the actual champions themselves, you mentioned kind of the recognition. Any thoughts on maybe some kind of formal recognition? I'm hearing of a couple of organizations, they're mainly US based, that you know, for their end of year kind of performance objectives, that there's actually a well-being target in there. Any thoughts on that? Is that something you would consider in the future?
Yeah, I mean, what we do in terms of, I mean, because we're not a private company, so from a recognition point of view, we can't pay bonuses or anything like that. So we have a recognition program around where there is peer-to-peer nominations under certain categories. And then there's manager nominations of staff across the organization, not within their own team. And again, recognizing them within certain categories. And actually, when we did what we call our Kudos Awards, which is the peer-to-peer, a number of people, and two in particular who would be quite visible within the well-being space, have been nominated for awards by their colleagues because of what they do for everyone else. So, you know, they get a voucher, they get an email from the chief executive that goes across the whole organization that tells people, you know, that they've been nominated and that they've this decision, all those nominations are put to a recognition group who are a peer group, and they decide who wins the awards. So I think the fact that someone who actually drove the fitness classes for a period of time in the organization actually won one of those awards because of her commitment and how valued it was, I think that shows a lot. I think future recognition in terms of maybe goals and objectives or KPIs, you know, certainly it would be a key performance indicator for me, for example, because I'm the HR director, and it would be for other people like Liz Giltrap, because that's a core part of her role. But it's probably something we could think about, you know, for the future. But as I say, it's there within that culture. And what we're trying to do is recognize the steering committee for the contribution that they give. And so we would always, you know, send out an email and publicly recognize them within the limitations, I suppose, of what we have. But it is a really interesting concept, you know, and I think it's great to see organizations putting specifics like that into performance evaluations. It's probably would be something a bit down the road for us, but it's definitely there in terms of the kind of the other ways that we recognize performance and contribution. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and great to hear of that recognition. That's a really nice way, I think, to recognize people.
Yeah.
How how are you managing now? Like, I guess you've been working remotely for the last, is it 6, is it 9 months? It's kind of hard to keep track.
Yeah.
How have you found kind of keeping that kind of engagement and culture?
Yeah, really, really challenging. As I said at the start, I think all of our kind of programs and everything we had designed within our strategy was all within the kind of 4 walls of our building. And so to kind of have to pivot and look at everything differently, it has been enormously difficult. But I would say, I think once everybody got through the absolute kind of carnage that was March and April, I think it was just all about getting everybody off-site, people having the technology that they needed. Because we had only begun, funnily enough, we'd only begun a remote working pilot in our organisation in January. Mm-hmm. And it was very limited basis. It was 1 day a week. So there was a really small number of people that were set up for it. So obviously that all went out the window when COVID hit and we all had to work from home. So once things started to settle, going back to the point I made earlier, what we decided we needed to do was go out there and ask people how they were feeling, ask them before we make any assumptions. We needed to find out how they were they feeling in a good place, and recognizing people who had children running around at home, they had caring responsibilities. It was all over the place, but do they have everything that they needed? Did they have any burning questions for the management team that they wanted to ask? And it was all done anonymously. And we got this data, I suppose, en masse. And so I suppose what we wanted to do was make sure that our efforts were being targeted in the right places. So a bit like the kind of point earlier, not to assume. So what came out of that survey was really interesting. We got a really good response rate. Nearly 70% of the organization responded. And a huge proportion, like up in the 80%, were really optimistic about working from home. They were really liking it, but they needed a number of things. So from that, we developed, self-assessments around ergonomics. We put in place facilities to get equipment out to people as quickly as possible, so that just physically they had what they needed. And then there was a number of themes that came out of it that people were, and one of the big ones was social isolation. People were feeling very disconnected and were finding communicating with their colleagues really challenging, and finding, it is when you walk into the HPRA, there is a certain feeling in the organization. It's a very friendly kind of place where it's not too big. So lots of people know everybody else. And there's all that banter that goes on between getting the lift up to the 4th floor and all the rest. And that just was all gone. And we had to think about new people who were starting as well. And how would we give them a kind of experience of the organization? And so different. So we started, I suppose, once we had all the kind of, I'd say, hygiene factors is how I would describe it in place for people, and they were working away, we started to look at the key themes that came out of that survey. And of that theme around social isolation and not feeling connected to colleagues, we started to work on this, I suppose, themed communications. So the main one was try and tell, so T&T. So what we were doing was coming up with different tools that might work for me, but not work for you. Let's put them out there and see what people want to do in terms of trying to increase that connection with each other, while not totally overdoing it, because everybody was getting a bit fatigued with all the Zoom quizzes and all this kind of stuff. That kind of ran its course pretty quick. So some of the things we've been doing is, we're encouraging people to try them and then come back and tell us what their experience is. So we've had Skype calls where we have people coming on and talking about their experiences using some of these tools, and then other managers can watch back and see, or other team members, and say, oh, look, that works for them, we might try it, or really didn't work for them, but actually we're a smaller team, so it might be more effective for us. So people are really liking these things. So it's everything from webinars to tip series to TED Talks. And then there's things like, say, an hour on camera. So we've used that ourselves. So basically everybody comes, there's a meeting date in your calendar and you log on and everybody has their camera on, with the sole purpose of it feeling like everyone's just in the office. So, you're working away, And it just captures all the kind of informal, like the doorbell ringing and a delivery coming, the dog barking, or you just being able to shout, basically ask somebody something live therein without having to send them an instant message or an email, and things occur to you to talk to your colleagues about that. If you were at home, in isolation, just in your office or at your kitchen table, that you're not going to pick up the phone or email about. So our own team have done that and actually found it really, really good. In fact, we have lost track of time and found that we're an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes still on camera. And it's sort of like, oh, okay, bye then. Everyone's going, but they don't necessarily want to go. So that's been really good. Or other, and it connects you back to your team a little bit. Other things we've done is we have a stand-up on a Monday morning where we go through our priorities and objectives for the week. And we do a social question. So when you've covered all your priorities, we do social questions. So that could be anything from, your guilty music pleasures. So we have some Dolly Parton and Garth Brooks fans in our team. To, this morning's question was, when you were small, what did you want to be when you grow up? So there was a lot of laughing around that, as we had people who wanted to own sweet shops, and I think someone else who wanted to be a hip hop dancer. So, there was those kinds of things just give you a little bit of a smile. It makes you feel a bit more connected to your team. And we're getting really positive engagement back from that. People are trying them out, they're liking them, and they're feeling like it's a little bit more of what the normal used to be. And I suppose another really key hallmark in terms of cross-organisational awareness, and something that people might find useful for them, is our staff in the survey asked, they wanted to know more about what's going on in the organisation. What are other people working on? Particularly for us, it was around COVID, because people were really interested, because as you rightly pointed out at the start, we had a role in PPE, but we also had a role in contact tracing. And we had staff working seconded into the HSE, so we have staff that are very knowledgeable in the area of vaccines and that are linked into the European network, and obviously that's very topical as well at the moment. So basically people wanted to know, well, what's everybody else doing, and we'd like to know more about it. So different people across the organisation have presented, just done a live call, maybe used some slides, maybe not. We've had panel discussions. And then people can log in and they can ask questions using the live chat. And I'm only talking about Skype now or Teams. It's nothing really transformational from a technology point of view. But also then people have also can watch it back because it's recorded. So, we're getting really great interest around things like that, where people are actually at the same time they're learning more about what their colleagues have done. And you're maximizing attendance way higher than it would have been if you were in the office and you were asking people to come down to a meeting room. So that has been, I suppose, a big positive for sure. But I'd say one thing that is a real challenge, and I think most organizations are probably in the same boat, is really about onboarding new people during this working remotely piece. And I think, we've really tried to keep close connections with people and really kind of stay close with them during their onboarding process. And we have tweaked our onboarding process to sort of be more responsive in the remote setting. But it is a really challenging time, for sure.
Yeah, particularly for somebody new joining an organization. I can only imagine what it's like for a graduate straight out of university, trying to get up to speed in a new organization, a new team, new people. That must be particularly challenging. But I love the idea. It's the first time I've heard of the kind of that hour on camera. That sounds interesting. So there's no agenda. This is the equivalent of your kind of chit chat. Is it like your kind of catch up, your water cooler, maybe while you're...
We're actually everybody's just working, but just the camera is on. So there's no agenda. There's nothing, like sometimes no one's talking. You can just hear noises or people typing. It's not with any degree. The whole idea is that you'd be doing that work anyway. So it's not an extra meeting you have to attend. You're just putting your camera on.
Right.
But naturally enough, there is little bits of chit chat, or there's people asking somebody for something that they're working on together. Sure. But you're just seeing people when they're not on, if you know what I mean. It's a funny one. I was quite skeptical about it when we first started, and actually I'll be a big fan of it now. We have them planned to the end of the year, so we really find they work.
Brilliant. Yeah, great stuff. I'm sure there are many will look to that and take that on board. One thing you often talk about, and you touched on it earlier, is the fact that, I mean, you've achieved the KeepWell Mark, you've achieved so much, and you continue to do so with little or no, well-being budget, if you like. What advice would you have for other organizations? Because some of the feedback I get is that we can't do that. We're not Google, we're not Facebook.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for those people, those organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I've been known to talk about this. I agree 100%. It's really tough. And it's tough when you're engaging your employees, you're trying to have an employer brand, and you look at what the competition is able to do. So what I would say to people is really try to be creative. First of all, see who you have in your organization and who's willing to get involved, lead out and support. So as I said to you, the only reason we knew we had a yoga instructor and a fitness instructor was because we asked. We just asked for their people who would like to get involved, that had the particular qualifications. So we put that call out there for anything from mindfulness to what you tell us what your skills are, and are you willing to share them with your colleagues. So that's a really good tip, because you'd be surprised what untapped resources are actually there for you. The second thing I would say is that there's a number of different kind of charity organizations and community organizations, you know this yourself, where you can go along and you can hear and learn for free, where you can, or for very little. I mean, there's superb organizations out there that you can partner with, like Sea Change, like Suicide or Survive, that even when you tap into their training, a lot of it is subsidized, or it costs very little. And then the other thing I would say to people as well is, most organizations now have an employee assistance program, but one of the big things with EAPs is promoting them and really squeezing everything you can get out of them, right? So I would say, look at your EAP, look at promoting it, look at targeted communications, look at all the things that you can get that are covered in there that you can repurpose or use. They're always really important as well. And then if there are people that you are interested in having to come and talk to your organization, you can then save your budget for things like that. And you can always negotiate with people as well. I mean, we would say negotiate. You have to. But there's also opportunities to partner with other organizations as well. And, that's where community is really, really important. And I think that's where, when people get involved and follow people like yourself, Brian, who's kind of, promoting and who's, staying at the cutting edge of what new research is coming out and are working with companies, that's where you learn and you kind of meet people and you get opportunities to share. So I think no matter what size organization and what's your budget, there's loads and loads of things you can do. But start by looking inside, because you'd be surprised what you might find.
Great advice there. And an important almost first step would be, you're going to need to have that desire and passion to bring something in and to spend time doing it. It's not gonna happen for you. But if you have the drive to do it like you have, like Liz clearly has as well, then you can achieve an awful lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And you were good enough. You submitted a project to us as well, and the postgrad in workplace wellness at Tangent at Trinity, which again you're always just interested in kind of learning more, I guess. And you had a team of students working on a particular challenge you were facing. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we were delighted. Again, like I said, we would never know about these things if we weren't part of the community, and we were grateful to get a chance. So we heard that there was a practical opportunity to put forward a problem we have to a group of students that were really bought into and very enthusiastic, really passionate, great crew, really great crew. And the issue we asked them to look at was about the engagement of men in wellbeing, which has been historically poor across the board in the organization. Now, we do have a 70-30 gender breakdown, women to men. So we don't have a lot of men in the organization. Even still, though, proportionately, their engagement was low. So we asked the group, the project group to look at this. And so what they did was they did their academic research in the background, but they also came in and they did focus groups. They spoke to seniors, managers and leaders as well. And then they took that data away and they kind of compared it to their research, and they came back and gave us a number of recommendations. And then they presented it back to us as part of the assessment for their qualifications. So that was really good. And we got to ask them questions and everything. So, and also get the benefit of hearing all the other projects and the other companies too. So that was really interesting as well. So it was really, really interesting. Things we learned around, you know, the research that shows that how you, the language that you use in terms of whether it's more appealing to men or not. In terms of the kind of gift, I would say, of time, and when you schedule events and making it more appealing and more likely that people will attend. And then the kind of concept of community and whether people know somebody that they'll go to, they're more likely to go to an event or take part if there's someone there that they already know. That came back as a really big theme. And then the whole concept of psychological safety, and it ties in with that as well, and helping to introduce people to each other in ways that aren't really awkward, but in ways that are informal and help to build up a network for them of people. They're much more likely to engage. So there was loads of really good takeaways for us from that. And I was really struck by, you know, because when they do the focus group, people nominate, they go forward for it, and they meet the students by themselves. So we're not part of it. And I think the focus group was set up for half an hour. And, you know, at an hour, it was still on. I was like, you know, you're wondering, is it going okay? And are people contributing? And I mean, and the project group said, you know, they got such great engagement. They really were buzzing after it, the whole lot. And even the people who partook in it, they really enjoyed it. So, you know, getting that external view is really rare, that you get somebody outside to come in with no blinkers on and tell you how it is. So it was a super experience. So we were delighted with it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I received great feedback from the project team themselves about the engagement they received from the focus group, from yourselves as well, kind of all the support. So they thoroughly enjoyed working on that project themselves.
Oh, that was good. Now you could tell by them, you know, so they were a great group, and it's a great course. It's great to see kind of investment and to see workplace well-being being kind of elevated up, because it is such an important area that just keeps growing and growing in terms of focus. Both when I think organizations are riding high and they're trying to, you know, attract in talent, everybody can be kind of get very focused on workplace well-being as an attraction tool. But I think when things are not so great, and when the economy could be in recession, or, you know, the pressures people are under, it's equally as relevant, you know, so it doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you're at. I think it's really, really relevant. So it's great to see.
Yeah, really good point. It shouldn't matter, you know, where you are as an organization, where the economy is. I mean, well-being of your people is always going to be important. And actually, you know, great that you mentioned it. On a recent survey, I asked that question: has you know, well-being moved up the priority list as a result of COVID-19 of the last number of months? And 90% of attendees on that webinar said yes, it had. Wow. So you know, I think we're hearing more language on the radio and the advertisements about COVID, about everything else that's going on. It's, you know, wear a mask, stay safe, wash your hands, and look after your mental health. So I think there really is a renewed focus, something that we just wouldn't have seen or heard 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago. So I think things have changed, or I think we really are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that most people, their work has changed and it's more part of their home and work have become very blurred. So it's even more important that your employer is looking out for your mental well-being, because for a lot of people, the social piece of work is gone, and you know, work is now part of your home, and lots of people don't have the ideal setup at home. They don't have an office, they don't have the space. they're sharing the space, or their Wi-Fi isn't great, or, you know, for all other reasons, and work might have been the escape. And I think now even more so, employers have an obligation, no matter what their budgets are, you know, everyone can afford to check in and ask people how they are, and kind of follow through on that. So I think it's never been more important.
Yeah, well said. And speaking of that, just in your own opinion, I mean, what does the future of work look like? I'm guessing we're not going to go back to the 5-day working week, or any thoughts on that? I mean, full time in the office.
Yeah, I think some people will, depending on their role. But I mean, for us, what we're doing at the moment is we're carrying out another survey to see where we are now and how people are feeling. And we actually we completed that, and we're just doing the analysis at the moment. And the early signs are, you know, people are really enjoying working from home, and they would like it to continue. But obviously, you know, the future of work is a big question that every organization is asking, and has really big implications for us as a society. You know, in terms of even, you know, the city centre. I know where I work in Dublin too, you know, the life and soul of Dublin too is all the office buildings around it. So, you know, I can imagine how quiet it is at the moment. For us, what we're doing at the moment is we're actually going to start actively looking at the future of work and what it might look like. So we're actually engaging the services of an external organisation to come in and help us do an objective, unbiased analysis of, you know, the what, where, how, and when of work, and with the view to helping us make with any decisions we might be making into the future if this becomes a more longer term arrangement. But certainly the feedback that we are getting from people is that they are enjoying not having to commute, that they are enjoying being closer to their families, you know, being able to log off work, having done 7 or 8 hours, but still only be 5 minutes away from putting on the dinner or collecting kids, or, you know, this being able to, you know, I mean, we would have had a much more rigid time and attendance system, for example, in HPRA. And when this all happened, we kind of removed all the barriers around that and made it much more flexible to work when it suited you, as long as it was being done in a sustainable way, that you were looking after yourself. So people can now go for a run at 11 o'clock and be back for a 12 o'clock meeting, or, you know, manage their own time with their manager and do that in a much more flexible way. And I think people are really enjoying that. So what we want to do is make sure and look at all the good parts, and also look at the parts maybe that aren't working so well. And like I've said a few times, we need to be careful that we're taking everybody's views on board, because I think for some people the experience working remotely isn't as positive, and that's really important to look at that as well. And any decisions you make could change how somebody does their job very fundamentally, so people need to be part of that decision.
Excellent. Yeah, and interesting to hear, you know, you're removing those barriers, as you mentioned, in terms of the time. Daniel Pink talks about that as a really important component, or a motivator for people, kind of motivation 3.0. He speaks about autonomy. So the fact that people have autonomy in their working day, that, you know, they can go for that run at 11 if you like, the meeting at 12, collect the kids at 4. Maybe that means doing an hour in the evening time after that, but once it's kind of results based.
Yeah. I mean, and people operate differently. You know, I was, our L&D manager is doing a bit of work around this at the moment, and she was talking about, you know, people who integrate work into their daily life, and then people who separate it, you know. So I would say I'm more of an integrator. You know, I do that. I get up early and I kind of maybe do an hour before the kids get up, and then I'll come away from work and I'll get them dressed, get them out to school, and then I'll go back, and again in the evening maybe do homework and then come back, you know. Whereas she was saying she likes to be a separatist. She likes to keep things very separate, keep her working day, and then work is done, you know. And what's really important, I think, is the understanding and appreciation that everybody works differently. Yeah. So while it might suit me to log in at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and send an email to my team, it may not suit them at all to be responding to me. And I need to not have that expectation that they're going to do that, right? And I don't. So when they get an email from me at that time of night, I know that they won't be logging back on until 8 or 9 the next day, and that's fine. But that suits me to do that because I was doing homework or whatever it might have been earlier on in the day. So I think that's the bit that everybody has been trying to get. And I think everyone has gotten a lot better with that, is understanding that it's different to being in an office where we're all there 9 to 5. You know, people are doing their best at the moment to make work fit in around their home lives, and, you know, and vice versa, and find that balance.
I think that's a really interesting question for everyone listening in to think about. Are you an integrator, or are you a separatist? Maybe are you a bit of both? Maybe depending on the day.
Exactly.
And we focused almost completely on the organizational well-being, but you're touching on it there. Tell us a little bit about, if you could, like, how are you looking after your own well-being? It sounds like you've got a busy household, a busy role. You're on a couple of boards as well, which you haven't even got to discuss.
Yeah, so I have 2 kids. I have a boy and a girl, 6 and 9. And I have to say they're very good. And they really understand that both myself and their dad works from home. So they really get that, you know. Now, mind you, there could be times where there's someone sitting on the floor beside me coloring, or, you know, that's just the way things are. We've also managed to, we have 3 dogs, and they're all puppies. So that's, don't even ask. That is an experience in and of itself. So yeah, I try to be that integrator. Can be very difficult, because you can sometimes feel like you never have a break for yourself. And those things you might have done before, like going to get your hair done, or go get your nails done, or one of those things, or just go off to the shops and have a wander around Penny's for 2 hours. That's kind of gone now. So, you know, I do like to go for a walk, and I really like to listen to kind of podcasts. I'm a bit of I like true crime and things like that. So I listen to, or an audiobook. I'm a big Audible fan, so I listen to a lot of books. And that really helps me. And I really like mindfulness as well. So I religiously use Headspace, the app, as I find it really, really good, especially at nighttime, in terms of kind of winding down my mind, because it can be very, very busy at times. I was a great runner when I was in the office, and that was because there was a few of us that ran together, and I really missed that. Because if there's a day you weren't really feeling up to it, someone else is saying, oh, come on, by the time we get down the canal, it'll be over and done with, you'll be grand, and you feel great. So I do miss that, and I don't get myself out as much as I should. But yeah, things are very busy. As I say, I'm on a board. I'm on the board of HIQA, and I'm also on the board of a charity called 1 in 4. So board work is really, really interesting, really good to see other organizations from a different perspective. But both very, very busy organizations dealing with a lot of challenges. So, you know, that does add a lot of extra workload to your day. But I think as long as you find it interesting, as long as you feel you have something to contribute, you know, it doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like a lot of extra work. So as long as that's how it feels, I'm happy to keep doing it. Brilliant.
We might have to get you on to another episode to continue the conversation, but that's been fantastic, Lynsey. We've covered so much. Where could people go to find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I am on Twitter, but I'm not a big Twitter user. I'm a follower rather than a contributor. But definitely LinkedIn. And, you know, I have to say in the last, since with the pandemic, I'm not posting as much as I used to. But if people want to reach out and want any information on anything, just contact me through LinkedIn. Because as I said, like, we have benefited so much from other people like yourself and others helping us, and we'd like to return the favor. And if there's anything anybody would like to ask more about and more information on, be only too happy to help out. So definitely can contact me, message me on LinkedIn.
Brilliant, Lynsey. Thanks so much for saying that and for sharing so much detail today. I've really enjoyed it. Take care, and we'll chat with you soon.
Thanks again, Brian. Take care.